Love is in the air. The motto of our work is "Love is in the air." The multisensual meaning of this phrase perfectly describes what we do and what we want to do. Love is something you cannot see or grasp. It's a nice feeling that people can experience, or even keep experiencing. JetAge Airlines consists of 4 owners and professional instructors. We can boast about their approach to customers because we had a personal experience and saw that this approach is superior. And why is that? Because they are doing their job from the heart. They love flying, and their main aim is to make their clients experience these feelings as well. Just because of the special approach to customers and a genuine passion of flying, it is an honor for us to share with you the personal stories of the company owners and trainers. We also bring you our personal experiences of flying with JetAge Airlines in the following English lessons. University of Life especially thanks one of the owners, Mr. Radovan Kapsa, who was fully dedicated to us despite his busy schedule. Thanks to him, we can prepare new English lessons for you. The articles for you are written by the CEO of the University of Life, Renata, personally experienced, honestly studied, with passion from the heart, and with the experience of fear in the eyes. My first experience was to attend a course called Pilot on Trial. This course is designed for anyone who wants to experience more than just a regular flight by plane. Within one day, you will experience many new things about flying and also learn a lot of new information. For me as a woman who did not know the first thing about flying, it was really interesting to attend such a course as Pilot on Trial. I am very grateful that I could spend this day with one of the professional JetAge instructors, Mr. Andrei Kokesh. I admire him because he can say things simply and clearly. I personally know that the simplest things are the hardest to do. At the same time, I am grateful for women questions like whether it is possible to capture the frequency of commercial radio stations on board, how to convert feet to meters, how you can easily navigate by compass, and why is it better to land with the aircraft with the wind to nose than with the wind from the back, and so on. He managed it all with a kind smile on his face and professional explanation. It was a beautiful day that I will remember for a long time. Our day began with a knowledge-based training session. We had a pre-planned route of flight. I learned how to read maps and what the rules are for flying in different areas and altitudes. Then we checked the weather and meteorological conditions, and I learned to read from an aviation report. During that, I realized that the clouds have their own kinds, and a dark blue cloud is not a good cloud. And then we carried out the pre-flight briefing and safety instruction. After taking part of theory, we came to our aircraft, a Diamond DA-20A1 Katana, OM Love. Since we flew from Bratislava, Slovakia, airport, that is an international airport, access to flying is subject to special safety rules. Therefore, together with our flight instructor, we passed through General Aviation Terminal, GAT, through which pilots, crew, and VIP passengers cross. The flight instructor carried out the pre-flight aircraft inspection. Then he asked for a permit to fly, and we could go flying to the clouds. On the ground. My knowledge-based training. In the following section, you can read a few things that I learned during the pre-flight preparation. The theory about flying is enormous, but there are few areas that interested me, and I wanted to understand them. And those I bring you in the following passage. Then we will finally take off into the air for a while. Ground preparation of the pilot. Controlled, uncontrolled areas. In the beginning, we talked about what the pilot preparation before a flight looks like. The primary thing for us was to see if we met conditions for flying on that given day, assess the weather conditions, and make sure that visibility for flight is more than 5 kilometers from the ground. Since we had good weather, we fulfilled this condition and we could fly. On the map that my instructor showed me, I was informed that we have controlled areas marked in blue and temporarily set aside or limited areas marked in red and green. Outside these uncontrolled areas of airspace, Class G can also be found. Before each flight pilot draws his route for flying, in the appropriate parts of the map, he will write these three basic features: course, time, altitude. Subsequently, when he takes off, he tracks his route on the land and compares what he sees with the map: rivers, towns, mountains. The VFR of the flight, Visual Flight Rules, has its charm because when the pilot is in an uncontrolled area of the G-class, he manages the control by himself. He must monitor the area and has to be in communication with other aircrafts in the area and the information station Bratislava Info. He must monitor the surrounding area often and pay attention to paragliders, glider pilots, balloons, and often to even modelers with a large model aircraft. Class G uncontrolled space reaches outside controlled airspace up to 8,000 feet, about 2,438 meters. 1 foot equals 0.3048 meters. Before the flight, the pilot sets down the course, which refers to the magnetic field. What was interesting to me was that pilots and some instruments are governed by magnetic north, which is not identical to geographic north. The diversion of the magnetic axis is about 11 degrees. In practice, it still used the compass course, which is corrected for errors caused by electromagnetic radiation from the devices on board the aircraft and may indicate a difference of a few degrees. However, in larger aircrafts, more accurate instruments are used to determine the position. However, if the pilot is already in controlled airspace, especially blue on the map, and he is already subject to regulation, he must be in communication with the station that controls this area. The station will then issue instructions to be carried out by him. For instance, the permission to enter this area, information about other operations, instructions to avoid this operation, takeoff and landing permits, and so on. The CTR, control zone, is situated in close proximity to the airport and its lower border touches the ground. The reason is that it is the closest area near that airport, and aircrafts are usually the lowest around it. The CTR is therefore controlled from the ground, and the control worker manages all operations in that area. At a greater distance, it is TMA, that is, Terminal Maneuvering Area, which is no longer touching the ground. Vertical boundaries TMA-1 Bratislava start at 1,000 feet, 300 meters above the ground, and ending at 5,000 feet. It's for practical reasons because the plane gradually descends when approaching, and in the area that is further away from the airport, the aircraft is at a greater altitude. In the conversion altitude, which is 8,000 to 9,000 feet, aircrafts begin to work based on flight levels. This means that pilots will reset altimeters to standard pressure, exactly 1013.25 HPA, and then above this level measure heights already in flight levels. Each aircraft has a different aircraft flight level. For one flight level, there is space of 1,000 feet, so that they have safe boundaries in between each other. And indeed, safety is paramount in aviation. So here I learned something about the controlled areas, blue on the map. Then there are red, green, and purple areas. Purple is a fauna and flora sensitive to noise, and the pilot should fly a minimum of 300 meters over such an area. But mostly it is a mountainous area, and pilots normally avoid them or fly at higher altitudes. Airspace and areas. In the airspace of the Slovak Republic, there is various other airspace and areas that are specific in their characteristics. These areas include CTR, MCTR, Control Zone, Military Control Zone, TMA, MTMA, Terminal Control Area, Military Terminal Control Area, LZR, Restricted Area, LZP, Prohibited Areas, TSA, Temporary Segregated Area, AWY, Airways, IP, Identification Zone. All these areas are defined by their horizontal and vertical boundaries and are specific in their purpose and conditions for their flight operations. CTR, MCTR, Zone Control, Military Control Zone. This is a controlled airspace established around the airport. This space may have the character of one of the classification groups. For example, MCTRs are Class C and CTRs are Class D. In this area, only controlled flights are performed with a reciprocal radio link under VFR and IFR conditions. The managing authority of this area is the Airport Control Tower, TWR. After mutual agreement between the paraglider pilot and the Air Traffic Control Authorities, RLP, it is possible to also perform a paragliding flight in a CTR, MCTR without a radio link. However, it is necessary to agree on this activity in advance. You must, via telephone, state your name, matriculation brand, or number of paragliders, the estimated start and end times of the activities, and the space of the flight performance. The RLP authority is entitled to such activities in CTR, MCTR space to authorize, prohibit or restrict in order to avoid the disruption of air traffic and flight safety. After completion of the flight operation, the pilot must report the closure of his activity to the RLP authority. Vertical border areas of the CTR, MCTR are from the ground, GND, up to a fixed height. TMA, MTMA, Terminal Control Area, Military Terminal Control Area, is a control area normally established at the point where routes of air traffic services converge in the proximity of one or more major airports. LZR, Restricted Area. These areas are designed for different activities as well as the activities of airspace users. This is used mostly for the needs of the Air Force, artillery, and troops for air defense because these limited spaces are established above the military shooting galleries, training areas, and so on. This is so that during their activity, other flights are not put in danger. However, we can also come into contact with limited space not only due to military operations, but also during various air competitions, for example, skydiving, which can take place over the airport restricted area. These areas are not limited constantly, but according to the requirements of individual users, they are activated at the required operating time. Typically, the space usage is planned a month in advance, and we can check its validity in a NOTAM report of the use of airspace for a given month. Of course, these spaces also have their vertical and horizontal borders. LZP, Prohibited Area. These areas are set up above important structures like nuclear power plants or explosives factories to avoid any aircraft entering this area, since any accident would have great consequences. Spaces are valid permanently, 24 hours a day, throughout the entire year. They are tracked by radar services, and in case of signs of unauthorized aircraft flight in this forbidden area, a military plane will take off to divert this aircraft away. TSA, Temporary Segregated Area. These areas are exclusively used by the Air Force. They belong under the Program Flexible Use of Airspace, FUA, Flexible Use Airspace. They are not permanently occupied, and activities there are possible to plan one day in advance. The info about the activeness of TSA space is possible to obtain in the RLP Center. TSA spaces have their vertical and horizontal borders. AWY, Airways. Airways are routes of aircraft flights in airspace, and these flight routes are created between radio navigation units or points in the airspace. The airwaves are divided into LAWY, low AWY, low air routes, and HAWY, high AWY, high air routes. Each airway is defined and has a given direction from where to where, the minimum allowable flight altitude as well as the range to the left and to the right of the routes. IP, Identification Zone. This is the area around the state consisting of a 5-kilometer wide border heading inland, besides CTR, MCTR, TMA, MTMA. To fly in this area without notifying the RLP authorities is prohibited. Ground preparation of the pilot. Flight plan, meteorological situation. If a flight crosses the state border, usually it is necessary to file a flight plan. In general, we put there the type of aircraft, the takeoff and landing airport, the intended flight route, and other additional information. It is important that the competent airports know about us. In addition, the pilot must always be familiar with the meteorological situation before the flight. The weather forecasts are usually issued with a validity up to 1 day to be as accurate as possible. If the pilot neglects this preparation, it may happen that the weather conditions at the airport may be so bad that he cannot land, which could be potentially dangerous. Indeed, it was interesting to learn that the pilot recognizes different types of clouds, rainfall, and other phenomena, as well as learning to read coded weather reports and forecasts. For example, I attached an image, and maybe in some later lesson we will learn how to read this report. When you look at the picture, you will understand that it would take a long time. When we finished the ground preparation, we had to control the aircraft and explain all the alarms on board of the aircraft. Honestly, if the instructor asked me to repeat which device is for what, I would probably look at him with sad eyes and tell him that I do not remember. I admire these people that can overcome these obstacles on the way to their dream of flying. Ground preparation of the pilot. Pre-flight inspection of the aircraft. So we checked each part of the plane before the departure of the aircraft. It starts on the left side next to the cockpit and proceeds counterclockwise. At the beginning, the chassis and hydraulic lines to the brakes are checked, which can detect leakage of the operating liquid. It was an interesting sight to see the pilot walking and checking around the aircraft and the client behind him and acting like everything is understood. Furthermore, we continued along the leading edge and checked the critical angle of slope indicator fall warning. When the plane reaches the critical angle of slope, it creates a vacuum at the wind leading side of the wing, and then a signal starts to alert the pilot. This means that the aircraft has come close to falling speed, and the pilot must put things right and ramp up the plane. Then we continue along the leading edge, check the pilot static tube, also as Prandtl tube, which is used to measure the gas flow on the principle of static and dynamic pressure of the measured gas. This means that the device is used to measure the speed of the aircraft. It senses dynamic and static pressure. We check ailerons and flaps, which must be fixed in tow, and then the entire body is checked. We also check the elevator with its balancing area. Thanks to the elevator, the plane goes up and down, and is controlled forward or backward by the movement of the control stick. The rudder is connected with a foot control that moves left and right. We have to check the right undercarriage leg, brakes, tires, and also the bottom of the wing. I certainly do not remember everything that was checked, but everything was fine and we could go into the air. In the next lesson, we will talk about the devices on board the aircraft and how it actually works. I will probably have to undergo one more course to be able to really explain these things. In the air. My first flight in the cockpit with a professional pilot. It is very difficult to describe the experience of flying. I believe that everyone has to feel these experiences by themselves. Therefore, I bring you a video recording in which we can see a few moments and shots from our flight. For me, as a person who for the first time sat in the cockpit with the pilot, it was an incredible experience. Our plane was not large, and therefore gusts were felt often, and it felt like we were floating on water. During this flight, I experienced moments when you really can say that a company with such an approach to customers deserves my admiration. Joy and gladness from the flight was in the first place. The smile on my face appeared also when the instructor began to speak with other pilots in the air. They respect each other and keep informing each other, and when we wanted to land first, they let us do so. My eyes were pleased that I could have a close look at the place that is close to my heart, which seemed even more beautiful from the sky. My flight instructor flew over the Czerwony Kamen Castle, a place so beautiful for me. Slovakia is a country with beautiful castles, palaces, and nature. Later, we flew over our capital city of Bratislava and over the Bratislava Castle, which was also wonderful. Naturally, there is a beautiful view of the sunset. At that moment, when you look at the sunset, in your head takes place various philosophical reflections on life, work, love, and many other things. This experience will give you the strength to overcome more obstacles on the way to your objective, and therefore I recommend it. Well, the last experience that I definitely want to repeat once more was something that is called a flyby, when we flew over the runway very quickly and suddenly do not know how we found ourselves in a second very high. Before this, my instructor said to hold my camera fast that it does not fall out. I usually do not listen, but I do not know why I listened to him subconsciously and did well. It was not that I almost dropped my camera, but I felt that I will fly away. This experience is very hard to describe. You must experience it. The adrenaline that you experience, you just have to repeat. I hope that you enjoy this short video that I recorded with trembling hands for you, and you will be with us in the next English lesson, where we introduce you to the owners of JetAge and their personal life stories. It is important to go after our own dreams, and when you work hard, learn, and do your work with love in your heart, one day you can also have your own company, or just the pleasure of working with people.